we are joined from Cape Town by South Africa's Trade and Industry Minister, Rob Davies. Minister Davies, thank you so much for joining us here on Beyond Markets. Now, of course, the big challenge in terms of trade is to facilitate greater inter-Africa trade, which is a cornerstone of the South African government's new growth path. We've got several targets, one which talks about a continental free trade area by 2017. We also know that the tripartite has a separate agreement and there are some challenges. Take us through the discussions that you've been having with counterparts and stakeholders around looking at some of the challenges in getting the continental free trade area by 2017, a target which some people have said is quite ambitious.
Well, good evening, Kareem, and good evening to the viewers. I think that there's a high level of consensus that I'm detecting that the African continent has got to place itself on a new growth path if we're going to consolidate this very, very positive period that we're now in of optimism based on a growth performance that's been quite outstanding over the last few years. And that new growth path has got to be based on industrialization. And if we look at emerging economies and peer countries in BRICS, we see that they are all turning to their domestic markets. So the problem we have as Africa is colonialism divided us into 54 different countries, and we have to find a basis for industrial development based on regional integration, and particularly on broadening regional integration beyond the existing regional communities. So the tripartite negotiations are ongoing. They are making progress. There's been an agreement that the negotiations will be between countries which are not covered by existing arrangements. So we're not going to reopen the SADC FTA or the East African Community arrangements. And we've also agreed on the broad level of ambition. So I think that good progress has been made over the last few years. Whether we can make the continental FTA by 2017, I think if we don't make it by 2017, it won't be too much later than that. That's a broad indicative target. So I think all of these things are eminently doable.
Now, of course, there's a lot of optimism, there's a lot of excitement about the potential, but there are real challenges. Take us through some of the impediments or some of the difficulties, particularly in getting integration and getting these continental free trade area. We know that South Africa and Nigeria are the two major economies. We've seen some indications that you found consensus on a range of issues, but disagree on others as well. As it stands in relation to the continental free trade area, what are the kinds of sticking points that you think ought to be addressed for you to be able to get as close to that target as possible?
Well, I actually don't think that there's that many difficulties in negotiating a free trade area. It's eminently doable, as I said earlier. The issue is going to be that is not going to, on its own, deliver the kind of results that we need to achieve. We've got to consolidate and complement that with a very ambitious infrastructure development program across the continent. The parameters of that have been sketched out, but we've got to raise the funding to be able to address particularly connections between our own economies. It's not so difficult to find resources to support programs that are going to build infrastructure from a mine to a port and take raw materials out of the continent. But we've got to find our way into that. We've also got to find our way into cooperating around how do we sketch out a process of adding value to our mineral products, and how do we do the same with agricultural products through agro-processing. I think those are the bigger and deeper challenges. Between ourselves and Nigeria, I think we reached an important understanding on, for example, the Nigerian motor industry in the bilateral meeting we had earlier this week. And we will be presenting our colleagues in Nigeria with a proposal to negotiate an auto sector agreement, which will include offering them a lot of learnings and technical support from our own automotive program. And in return, they will open up some space for South African component manufacturers to be manufacturing the inputs into the initial phases of the Nigerian program. program. I think that's an example of trying to find very concretely the kind of win-win cooperation to promote industrial development across the continent.
Minister, final question. Of course, very ambitious plans, but where's the money going to come from to match the ambition? What has been the appetite of the private sector players? Are they keen to come onto the party around this infrastructure rollout for the continent?
Well, to some degree, but I think that we've got some challenges. And it's in that context, for example, that our ambitions around the BRICS-led development bank have to be seen. We do need new players. We do need to be accessing the surplus capital in capital surplus countries around the world, countries which have previously been investing in various assets in the developed world which are no longer cracking it for them. We need to be accessing that in various forms. And so, for example, the BRICS-led development bank we see as a major potential instrument to complement and add resources to infrastructure development on the continent.